Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Essentials for Planning a Successful Event. My name is Rubina, and I'll be your host for this session. A couple of housekeeping things to keep in mind. Please ensure you're on full screen to maximize your comfort in receiving the information. If you need tech support, please write us a message in the chat, and we will do our best to help you. Feel free to post your questions in the chat section, as Danielle, our speaker, is available to take any questions. Now to provide some information on the session itself. In Essentials for Planning a Successful Event, Danielle will talk about all of the fundamentals of planning an event so that you will walk away confident and capable of putting on an event you can be proud of. You will be learning the 5 C's of event planning, industry tips and secrets, troubleshooting, budgeting, and be equipped with an event planning toolbox. By the end of the session, you will walk away with a comprehensive collection of tools and templates that you can take and implement right away to help you be successful in your next planning endeavor. I will now introduce our speaker for this session, Danielle Redekop. Danielle is the Development Coordinator for Alberta for Crohn's and Colitis Canada. Prior to joining the organization, she spent over a decade in corporate event planning and marketing. Over the years, she's seen it all from small, intimate dinners to large trade shows and galas to massive 10-day Hawaiian conventions. Active in her community, Danielle has taught yoga for 9 years, eventually starting a yoga festival in Calgary. Living with Crohn's, she loves to stay physically active by running, cycling, doing yoga, and has a dream of staying in one piece long enough to complete an Ironman. Not one to sit still, she's always on the move looking for ways to grow and better herself and her community. So without further ado, please welcome Danielle Redekop.
Thanks, Rubina. This was funny for me because Rubina is actually my boss. She's my manager here at CCC. So it was kind of fun having her get to come in and introduce me. It felt like a role reversal, but thank you. Fair warning to everybody. I woke up with a nice little cold this morning. I apologize. I have my Vicks vapor stick that I'm like inhaling constantly. So if you see me doing some weird stuff over here, I'm just trying to make sure that I still have a voice to talk to you all. So like Rubina said, you can enter questions in the chat throughout. I was also just saying to Dara, who's running our Zoom and everything, that I'm fully open for this being very interactive. So if anyone has questions as I say something, please do feel free to unmute yourself and just ask away. As I'm sharing my screen, I probably won't be able to see the chat, but if you do enter something in the chat, I will, I'll catch it at the end and we can talk and answer questions and stuff then too. So yeah, thanks everybody so much for joining. I'm just going to share my presentation up on the screen here, if I can. Hopefully that's working there for you guys. All right, so like Rubina said, this is essentials for planning a successful event. And I'm really excited to get to share this with you guys all. Like Rubina said, I have been doing this for about 10 years here, doing event planning, mostly in the corporate world. And it's a really big passion of mine. It's I know I'm a little bit of a freak because it's not everybody's favorite thing to do. I know it can be really stressful, and I get that. And so my hope here is that I can kind of break some of this down for you so that it feels a little bit less overwhelming when you think about jumping into planning something, whether it be small or a larger scale fundraising event, or even something in your personal life too. So a lot of this stuff can translate and be super handy. So people think that event planning is easy unless you've done it, then you understand. But honestly, it's really quite challenging and it can be very stressful at times. So please don't worry if you've ever been at the helm of an event and you felt overwhelmed or thought that doing this is too scary. You are certainly not alone. Event planning is a lot of work. Everyone's been there. You've always been to an event before. You're at one now. But if you could think back to your last in-person conference that you went to, maybe it was the last Guts conference or something else. You probably sat at a table. Maybe there was a place setting there in front of you. Maybe there was a pad of paper and a pen. Not only did the event planner for that event plan out where those tables were going to be, how many people would sit at each one, maybe even who sat where, but the place setting, the paper, what it was going to look like, the pen, it was intentionally thought about by your planner. From which pen to the branding that was put on it, to ordering ahead of time, deciding how many, deciding where it should be placed on your setting, and either placing it there physically themselves or telling someone else exactly where to put it so that every place setting looked the exact same. There are, these are the kind of details that can go into event planning, and I know that it can be overwhelming. It sounds stressful, but hopefully with some of these learnings and the tips and tricks that we'll go over throughout, you will feel confident and well equipped as you gear up to plan your next event. So I won't spend much time here. Rubina gave a really great intro. Thank you, Rubina, and said basically what I wrote here as well. So, but yeah, like I said, I've been doing this for over 10 years. This is a nice little picture of my little family, my daughter. This is about a year ago. She's much older and more frustrating now. But yeah, I really have done lots of different things, from small intermittent dinners to 500 booth trade shows to large 10-day conventions with over 500 people. And I really do. I love teaching yoga, and I did start a large yoga festival here in Calgary in 2017. That, of course, is not happening live and in person anymore, but that's all right.
Danielle, we can't see your slides changing.
They are not. Oh, good to know.
Yeah, I'm like, there should be a picture. There's no picture.
How's this?
Okay, now we see a quote.
Thank you very much. That's perfect. That's all right. I'll go back to the picture because my daughter is really cute. And you guys should see it. There you go. Hopefully that's working for you.
Nope, not now.
It's a little
okay,
slow.
There we go.
It's coming.
Okay.
Sorry, Canva takes a second to translate over into our audience view, so I'll keep that in mind. Appreciate it. Okay. All right. So I have this quote here. We don't always remember the days, but we remember the moments. And I would say that this is why I got into event planning in the first place. It's funny, as we move into adulthood and we move through our lives, we don't really experience many things that are new or that are outside our usual realm of experience anymore. Day to day tends to go fairly similar. We have our routines. But by creating something that's fun and an exciting event for people, you get to help make those new experiences and those new memories that people will carry with them through the day to day. You probably have great memories from different events that you've gone to in the past, and you think back on them. You think back of what a great time it was, or that new fun experience thing that you learned, or that you got to try, or game you got to play, whatever it was. And that's really important. That really helps us to go through our lives and kind of enjoy it and have fun and get to try new things. So event planning, I think, is very important. I hope that you feel the same. So we're going to start going through the 5 C's of event planning, and you'll see throughout that I'll touch on the other points that we talked about. So keep your eyes open for those industry tips and also the toolbox pieces, which I'm going to do my best to share in the chat. I understand we've been having some difficulty with that translating through Feedloop. So if you're not able to get those physical pieces as I talk about them, don't worry, I will email them out to you later as well. So you will have them in hand by the end of this. So there are 5 C's, as you can see here. They are concept, coordination, control, culmination, and closeout. And each one is just as important as the next. And so I'm going to go through all of these in detail and break some things down for you. So first up is concept. When you conceptualize your event, you create the framework from which it will grow. So this is very important. In doing this, you will need to consider who your event is for, what will happen at your event, when will it happen, where will it be held, why are you doing it, and how are you going to pull this thing off? Most importantly is how are you going to pull this thing off? So moving into the concept phase, this is where you really get into your details. You don't want to skimp on details. This is where you get to brainstorm and really dream big, come up with everything that you can. You want to really mine down into each of those W's that were on that first slide there, and take the time to really understand every corner of your event. So the first one that you want to mine down to in this concept phase is your why. What's the purpose of your event? Your why is really important, just like it is in life, right? What's the end goal? Is there a clear objective? You need this objective to be clear and also communicable. Without knowing the purpose, it's really hard to drive forward the answers to those other pieces. Now in a role like we have here, all of our volunteers, obviously we're here for Crohn's and Colitis Canada, our why becomes a little bit easier, but it's still important to drive down and mine down into why exactly you want to hold this event. Now that could be part of your personal story, but maybe it's fundraising for a specific portion of CCC, maybe it's for a certain program that you'd like to fund or whatever it is. And it's really important to have that be very clear in your mind and that you're able to communicate that to the rest of your team when you get to that portion as well. So now that you know what your purpose is, you can start to think about who your event is for, your audience. Who do you want to aim this event towards? You have to be clear on who your audience is. This will help you to not only gear the event towards those people properly, but it's also going to help you in promoting it. You're actually going to reach those people better. So don't be afraid to be specific. This is something that we talk about in marketing a lot as well, that you can't talk to everybody. Not everybody's going to hear you. You need to be very clear on who you want to speak to, who you're trying to attract, so that you know how to speak to them and how to build something that's actually going to be interesting for them. Moving on from here, you're going to go into both the when and the where. So understanding the why and the who, it will help you make headway into when and where. These points need to work for your audience, for your who. This can encompass the time of year, the day of the week, the time of the day. For instance, you wouldn't plan an event for young parents that begins at 3:30 p.m. on a Wednesday because they're not going to be available when their kids just get off school. So you have to be sure to pick a time and a date that will work. Remember to look up also any local and religious holidays that are happening around the same time. You want to ensure that you aren't planning your event on another important date for your audience members. So I've also included where in this same slide because it goes really well hand in hand with your when. You will need to pick a location that actually works well for your audience. It's important to think about things like how easily your people, your audience can reach your venue, the accessibility of the space itself. And as we all know, washroom access is incredibly important too. So being sure that that is a big part of your where and your venue search. And then lastly, I'm going to cover what. So finally, what will happen at your event? Again, when you have your who and your why all fleshed out, you will have a better idea of which type of event will be the most effective. So let this guide you and use any and all of these resources at your disposal to get inspired. So that can be the internet, that could be maybe even events that you've been to in the past. Those experiences that we've had previously are very vivid and they're easy to pull from. So if something happened well that you really enjoyed and your audience is similar to you, why not try to recreate some of those points as well? So once we've got our concept all set, we're going to move into the coordination phase of our 5 C's. This is where the real planning can begin. And this is most likely one of the longest parts of the process. It's definitely the most involved because there will likely be quite a few things that you need to cover here. We'll get into a little bit of it here. And just know that every event's different. Every event is going to look a little bit different depending on the size. And again, like what your event is going to actually encompass what's going to happen. But to give you a little bit of a list, I know this can look overwhelming, but here's a little list of some of the things that you'll probably go over in your coordination phase. So things like deciding on a theme, creating a realistic budget, everybody's favorite, drawing up an itinerary, finding a good venue, selecting your food, selecting your decor, booking your entertainment, planning any speakers that you might have happening. Do you need rentals for this to fill in your venue? Any risk assessment, contingency planning is incredibly important too. We'll get into that too. And AV and tech. So I know that, like I said, this list can look a little overwhelming, and it's also by no means exhaustive. It could be shorter, it could be longer based on the size and the scope of your event. But the point is that throughout your coordination part of the process, you really need to ensure that all your bases are covered. So you want to start from the beginning of your event and work through it step by step. And don't forget the finer details that are easy to miss, such as how are your guests going to sign in? Do you need name tags for this event, or do people know each other already? How will they navigate throughout the day if it's a longer event that happens all day? So if you haven't planned an event before, it's easy to get caught up in the really fun parts of planning, like the venue search, the entertainers, and the food. But we do really need to make sure that the other fundamentals are there too, so that when the day of your event comes, it runs smoothly from start to finish. And if there is a hitch, you have a backup plan, that contingency plan to help you iron it out. And don't worry, we're going to dive deeper into budget soon, because I know you guys are really excited to talk about numbers. That's why you're really here. So an industry tip here during your coordination phases for venue selection, you want to be sure that you pick your venue based on your needs that you identify in your concept phase. So that means maybe it's not the coolest venue that you can think of in your city, and that's okay. It just has to be the one that's the most realistic, that's actually going to work for you. Many venues will offer in-house food service and AV, which is audiovisual. This is a really, really great convenience, but it can be more expensive. A lot of places will mark it up. So you can go with them because the convenience factor sometimes is worth it. But you can usually bring an external vendor, as well. There might be a fee, so it might end up taking a little bit more for on your budget, but and it'll be a little bit more work, but it might save you in that markup that the venue actually charges in the first place. So make sure that you weigh those options as you go through here. And venues are a really great place to actually save some money on your budget. So most venues are very able to cut down on their fees, their room rental fees, or if they are renting the furniture like tables and chairs and things like that too as well. There's typically pretty big service fees and things that they are able to cut. And do not be afraid to ask for charity discounts. Most venues will be able to offer you something. And honestly, the worst that someone can say is no. They're not going to say like, no, we're not going to host your event, but they might just be able to say, you know, we actually can't cover any more wiggle room for this. But like I said, most will be able to give you something. And a big tip, do your best to go on a site visit of the space. Of course, that's more realistic when we're doing something that's in person. But even something virtual, if you're doing a new platform, like we did with this feed loop, we looked it over a lot. And even then you can see that there's been some bugs throughout the time too, right? So be sure that you do a hands-on or eyes-on visit anyways. It's going to help you a lot as you plan the rest of your pieces. And if you can't get to a physical location in person, ask them for lots and lots of pictures. That will really help you with your logistics down the road so that you can understand physically what the space is going to look like on your day. Now, like I said, that site visit I find is very important. So here are some things that you want to consider when you are on a site visit. The logistics of the space, like I said, where your tables and chairs are going to fit, or whatever your setup is actually going to be. How is that going to flow? And can that number of people that you want to be there fit? This is an important thing. They have capacity rules at all venues. They're usually to fire codes. So ensure that whatever setup you want is actually going to work in your space. Another thing that you can check if you're on site is noise. What's the noise like? Are you in a busy area? Is there sirens going constantly? That's going to distract your event. Is there other events happening in the same place at the same time? And maybe they don't have a very good sound barrier. You don't know. You don't want to be listening to somebody else's presentation when they're trying to when your audience is trying to listen to your own as well. Like I said, room setup possibilities and capacity. Most places do have rules around that, but you can play with things as well. So just ensure that they can do things the way that you want, and that's going to work best for you. Accessibility, like we said, do you need wheelchair access? You need washroom access, we all know. And if you don't have washroom access, how are you going to get washrooms there? Porta potties are our best friends when we plan things, especially like Gutsy Walk, right? Another thing is, what's the lighting like? Do you have light pollution? Do you have adequate lighting? Do you need to bring in anything more? And washrooms, like I said. And yeah, it's always good to ask your venue contact if there's going to be other events held at the same time. This is really good to know, just because if there's a lot of traffic, you don't want to get too confused, people going to the wrong events. We've all seen it as a joke on like movies and TV where people are in the wrong wedding or something like that when they're in a ballroom at a hotel. So make sure that you've got enough space to make sure that your event makes sense there. Next industry tip is the food selection. So first and foremost, food is not a good place to skimp on your budget. good food and service does take investment. And of course, a lot of the times we will get it donated in our instances. But in the case that you are paying for it, it is really good to make sure that you do invest some of your budget here. Food and beverage is a really memorable part of the event for most attendees. So be sure to spend some time on this and pick things that you think are appropriate. I think we've all been, I always pick on weddings because I don't plan them, but we've all been to a wedding where everything was really great. It was really nice. The event was awesome, but the food was awful. And I bet you remember that. You remember how gross that steak was and how chewy, and like you didn't even want to eat it. And the cake tasted like chalk or whatever it was, you know. Those things stick in your head. We're very sensory people. So yeah, be sure that you think your food is a good choice. Put a little bit of your budget towards it. It's important. And remember your dietary restrictions. This is really important in our crowd. You're not ever going to get food that is going to cover every dietary restriction for every option. We know, especially in Crohn's and colitis, that people have different things that they can't eat. And you're not going to please everybody on the same plate, and that's okay. It's okay to have different options for them. Just do your best to cover as many people as you possibly can, and ensure that those people who do have really specific issues are still getting something to eat. Like I said, it's not a good place to save money because catering companies are not very flexible on their budgets. They really don't have a lot of wiggle room. It's not the best place to look for cuts. You can still always ask for a charity discount. Many are still willing to help out where they can, but it's best not to ask them to move on their margins. Next up for industry tips in this section is AV and tech. So this is something that we don't think a lot about. It's a pretty background kind of thing, but this includes lights and sounds and any visuals that you need to have. So if you have any presentation, whether it be virtually or in person, and so you need to know, does your venue have adequate power? We don't really think about that often, but like, are you going to need to bring in additional generators? And if you do you have room in your budget? Are you prepared to do that? Do you need Wi-Fi? Does your venue have enough Wi-Fi? And if not, can they extend it? Can you buy some more? And it's really important to ensure that you have a reliable on-site tech person. It's important. You may be the most tech-savvy person out there, but you're probably going to be busy on that day doing a whole bunch of other things. So make sure that you do have someone who is dedicated to that role, or have someone hired from the AV vendor to manage it for you. They know it best. But like I said, you can probably get away with having a volunteer or someone on your team actually do this for you.
Danielle, you have a question. Would you like to take it now or at the end?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so it's on dietary restrictions. So the question is, do you tend to send something out asking for dietary restrictions in advance of an event to make sure that if anyone has them, can notify you in an event?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that question. Yeah, absolutely. Send that out. Have that be part of your registration or whatever your system is for people signing up. You definitely want to know ahead of time, because you don't want to be scrambling on the day of and finding out, like I said, that someone doesn't get something to eat and you're running out to some store down the way to make sure they get covered. So yeah, definitely make sure that you cover that ahead of time, and communicate it clearly to your catering, whoever that might be. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Coming back to the AV and tech, it's really important to test here. You want to test it over and over and over again. Test your setup, make sure it works. And when you perform those tests and those sound checks with your speakers and your videos and your music, you don't want to watch to make sure that it's working. You want to look for mistakes, because the mistakes and the bugs are the things that you want to fix, all those little gremlins. That way, not only can you try to actually work them out before everything is live, but you are better prepared if something goes wrong. You know that it was coming. You are able to kind of jump in and try to fix it during that time as well. Our next industry tip moves into just honestly all-encompassing all vendors. Get a contract, please. No matter how familiar you are with them, with your vendor, it's still really important. This sets up your expectations and also payment terms, which are really important to them as well. So this is the best way that you can ensure that you're really communicating exactly what you want. That's going to be in your contract. And I mean, you don't want to be left on the day of knowing that your rental company isn't coming, or someone's missing and you're missing a really big chunk. It's important to be able to have that to fall back on if something goes wrong, but also so that they really clearly know what it is that you want. All right, if everyone feels good about coordination, I'm going to move on to control here. And I put a quote here that I'm not a control freak, I swear, because I used to always say that I wasn't, but I've fully embraced that I'm a control freak now. I know it. It seeps everywhere, and that's okay. So in this control phase, this is where you're going to see things like your site visits, your production schedule, which we'll go through, things like scripts that you need to provide to people, contribution from others. This is who's your team, who are you going to help, who's going to help you plan this thing if you need it. Your contingency plans, really important. And again, budget management. So not creation, but actually managing it after you've created this budget that you want to roll through. How are you going to make sure that you're staying on target? So I said here, draw up a timeline as you start planning and set yourself some clear targets of what should be done and when, and by whom. A timeline document can help you to manage your project timing and your team's responsibilities. So one option for this is called a Gantt chart. There are manual options. There's also online options for this. And I'm actually going to share one with you guys shortly here. And sorry. Okay. So yeah, it'll be part of your event toolbox as well. I'm going to show you an Excel template for one of these. But I do also encourage you to look for online templates. There's a really great one that Rubina and I have been working with called ClickUp that I highly recommend as well. But right now I'm going to take a moment and just go through this Excel one with you guys. If you give me just a moment, just flip over. Hopefully you all can see this okay. So it's a rather big Excel sheet. Please don't let this feel overwhelming. I'm just going to kind of show you what this looks like. And again, I will provide this to you guys afterwards, and either by email or through the chat. And there's lots of ways to do this. Like I said, this is a manual one, and it's been set up by me. I had done it for our Western Canada team planning, as you can see. And there's instructions on how to do it, but I do encourage you to look at those online options as they can be really handy too. But basically how something like this works, as you can see, it's a giant calendar. And so it's a calendar that you get to build in your tasks. So what it has here is different buckets and categories, like I would say. So if you wanted to call this one maybe marketing, and then in here, you can say this is one of your tasks is to write your first email. Now you can put a point person in here, and that way that person knows that they're responsible for it. As far as a category, I would say that this is open because we're going to say that it's actually due coming up here. And then you get to give it a start date and an end date. So we'll say, I'm just going to use these first dates that are here, sorry. And an end date of 17. So you can see basically how it works is it's coded. So you can see that my task is open and it needs to be completed during these first couple of weeks. Then once I finish it, I get to go in because I'm Danielle, I'm responsible for this thing and I want my team to know I'm working on it. It's coming along, things are going well. And we can change it to say that it's due, and you can change it to say that it's complete as well. So the reason why these are really handy is because it gives you a very good visual with colors and codes and bars within this entire calendar here that really show you a snapshot of the time leading up to your event. And it's really great when you do have a team because then anyone, if you can share this with everybody, they can come in and see like, oh, Danielle's written her email. It's good to go. We're done. We can move on to the next thing, which is maybe sending your first email. I encourage you to be as detailed as you possibly can in this. Really break down all of your tasks into small tasks and make sure that people know, like communicate with each other. If you're working with someone named Donna and she's responsible for sending that email, make sure that you guys collaborate on these kind of tools to ensure that everyone is using it and everyone knows what they're responsible for and to fill things in properly. So does anyone have questions about this? Like I said, I know it's a really big document, but the idea is basically to have a communal task list that involves some kind of a calendar so you guys can follow along, know when things are due and who's responsible and what the current status is. All right. What do I suggest sharing these documents on? That's a good question. Google Drive is a really great one because it actually can take an Excel document like this with all of its formatting and it can keep it. So that is, that's a really handy one that you can use for sure. Okay. If we're all good here, I'm going to move back into our presentation here. And hopefully, if you can't see it, maybe give me a heads up, and otherwise I'll continue on. All right, so control. In your control phase, what this really means is managing. It means managing your team, your vendors, and your volunteers. It also means managing your supplier and your vendor relationships. So if you're working with other businesses, you as the point person are responsible for ensuring that everyone is on the same page. So you want to make sure that you establish regular contact with your suppliers and your vendors and ensure that they're fully briefed on your expectations, on your goals, and your contingency plans. Lack of communication will definitely come back to bite you should anything go wrong. So again, just be really sure to cover all your bases. Over communicate in a case where you are questioning whether you should say something or not. It's always best to say something again. All right, now I hope I'm not moving too fast. We're going to move into another thing that's going to be part of your toolbox. This is, and it's one of my favorites actually, this is our production schedule. So this is going to be included in your toolbox, like I said, but I'm going to show you this again now so that you can see what it looks like and how it works. So a production schedule is an in-depth minute-by-minute schedule of your event from start to finish. You can't be too detailed in this thing. It's like your event Bible that anyone should be able to open up, refer to, and know where you're at in your timeline, who should be doing what, and what's required, what's coming up next. So we're going to take a look at that here. Now, again, I like using Excel for this because I find it to be a really great tool. So I'm going to show you, this is kind of the blank template, and I'm going to zoom in on here because I know that this is small. Okay, so this is a production schedule. It's empty right now. I'm going to show you a full one in just a moment so you can get a good idea. But basically, it's a big old open Excel sheet with your group name, your event name, its date, all of that good stuff. Now, each date, sorry, should have a page, as you can see here. And in here, you're going to put the owner of whatever that timeline is. So maybe I'm the owner of it. Our start time today was 2:15 or 2:15, sorry, Eastern time. And we're going to end our workshop at 3:15. So this is what is happening at this time. Ooh, if I can type. This is on Zoom, we know that. In here, maybe for materials required, I would put that I have your event toolbox that I need to send you. And then if there was any important notes that we needed to add in here, you would add it here. So this is a day of timeline. I'm going to show you now. You guys get a nice little glimpse of what our production schedule for this actual conference looks like. So this is the idea of one of these things filled out. It's a lot. But like I said, at first glance, it might look like a lot, but it's incredibly handy. So this helped us to know who needed to join our Zoom room when. We all needed to come in and we needed to do our sound checks. We made sure that all of our speakers were ready to go. And then I love to color code these things too. So everything that was color coded in blue is something that happened live. So we had our warm welcome for a couple of minutes, 10 minutes for our game and our fireside chat and all of this good stuff. So it's really important. I love this document because, like I said, it helps you to stay on time and make sure you don't run too long. But it also, you can send this out to everybody. We sent a version of this out to all of our tech people who were working with Zoom, to all of our speakers so that they knew exactly when they were on and what was coming next so that they knew, oh, this thing is just ending. That's my cue. I'm coming up next. And like I said, this is a very big one. We have a lot going on in this conference. Yours might be a lot smaller, and that works great too. It might just be a few lines, but it's still really important, especially when you're working with other people, that they know exactly what is coming up next and where they need to be. That way you're not the one telling them throughout the day, like, you're supposed to be in this other room. What are you doing? You need your schedule to be clear to be working on your stuff that you're responsible for too. Oh, I should have asked, I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions about that production schedule? All right. Oh yeah, I forgot that I put it's a control freak's best friend. It really is. That's my favorite thing. All right. Now, also a part of this phase is your contribution from others. So the dreaded group project. You all remember that awful project that you ended up doing most of the work on, and those darn slackers, they still took home a good grade, even though it was your work. And it probably could have been better if they had contributed, but they didn't. So this is a really fun one for event planners and any control freaks out there like me. You're probably starting to sense that we like to have everything done in a specific way, in a specific timeline. But it's really important to remember, especially on something that's a little bit bigger, that delegation is important. You need a team. And building a good, reliable team is a way to ensure that not only does the planning go smoothly, but that the whole event goes well. So in our case, we have lots of volunteers who like to be a part of our different events. And it's amazing to be able to include everybody. I think the key here is actually making sure that you place people with within roles and within tasks that they're capable of and they feel confident with and are comfortable doing. Maybe there's an area that they want to grow in and try, but maybe that isn't managing your speakers for the day or you know what I mean, picking the most important thing for that person. Just start them out slowly, make sure that it's appropriate. And you also really want to build your team with people who understand your why. So like I said, we all have a very similar why when it comes to planning events here because we're doing our work for Crohn's and Colitis Canada, but you want them to understand the specific why of your exact event. And that way that they can really help work towards it. And like we touched on earlier, be sure to establish clear communications and expectations with your team members. That way you can work together with healthy and frequent communication and everyone can feel really good about their part of it. All right, contingency plans. This is a fun one. So I have two quotes here that I tend to say when people ask me to describe what event planning is like. So I always say event planning is planning so that absolutely nothing could ever go wrong, and then not being surprised when something still does, because it will. And then the other one, event planning is like putting out a fire behind you while at the same time smiling and pretending that the fire is not there so that your audience doesn't see it, because they don't need to know. You can put out that fire without, unless it's a real fire. And then yes, of course, please get everybody out of the building. That is the other case. So I wanted to share with you guys two personal stories of events that I had and things that went terribly wrong that needed to be fixed during the event. So once I had a gala that was happening in Victoria, and it was being held in a venue called the Roundhouse, which is basically like an old, I think it's 150-year-old building where they used to store train cars at the end of the line in Victoria. So it had nothing. It had nothing in it. We barely had any power. We had tons of generators that were running to power everything in that place. And if anyone's ever visited Victoria, and I believe this was March, it's a little bit rainy. It rains just a little bit. So we were all ready to go. Doors were set to open for 500 people to come and show up and have a party in this place at 7 p.m. At 6:30 p.m., the skies just opened and it poured rain. You wouldn't believe how much rain we get. Unless you live in Victoria, then you probably completely understand. It was flooded. The doors behind the bar where there was a generator sitting, there was lots of electrical. We had probably 3 inches of water that came in and seeped under the door. And like I said, I'm about 30 minutes from the doors opening for all of these people to come in their fancy clothes and drink champagne and have a good time and hopefully not be standing in water. We had to set crates up to keep the electrical out of the water and make sure that we weren't shocking our bartenders and our poor servers and things. Try as I might, I was trying to get emergency I can't remember what they're called now, reliable, anyway, someone to come out and to actually fix the situation, bring me sandbags, anything like that. But of course it's pouring rain. They're getting lots and lots of inquiries, probably flooded basements and things like that at the same time. So couldn't get anybody there for probably 2 hours. And by then I would have a whole bunch of people standing in water, maybe getting shocked. So what did we do? I had someone run down the street to the nearest construction shop and bring back a shop vac. And I was standing outside in my fancy clothes, ankle deep in water, and I was shop vacuuming water out of the place and spitting it out into the other side, making sure that this place wasn't flooded. And it got done. But my goodness, that was not a fun, so we'll call it 45 minutes. We went a little bit over, doors opened, people came in. No one knew anything. The bartender's feet were a little bit wet for the rest of the night, but everything was good, and we're good to go. So, so yeah, it's just kind of when something goes wrong, you can't just stop and say like, oh, well, what do we do? You got to try to think on your feet and do what you can to make things happen, and fix what you can. I had one more quick story that I'll share too. I had a convention happening in Mexico with a good 500 people, I believe. And we've been leading up to this final giant party on the beach. All week we had been having this company build a pirate shipwreck into the beach that there was going to be a big party on at the end. Well, wouldn't you know it, on the day, apparently mine are all weather related, but on the day of the big party, there was like just gale force winds coming in. We couldn't safely have anybody on the beach. It was awful. So this pirate themed party that people were supposed to show up to in costumes, and like this whole themed area was just shot. So what we did was we had to make the call as early as possible. We took as many of the decorations as we could, brought them inside to the ballroom, got everything set up. And people were disappointed we couldn't be on the beach in this pirate ship that they'd been watching be built for 5 days, but that's okay. We still were able to do it. Everyone had lots of fun, and no one got blown away in the wind over the ocean. So yeah, contingency planning is incredibly important. Always be ready for something to go wrong, and just do your best to solve it. Like there's so many different ways that you can do that. Think on your toes, use your team, and do what you can to make sure that things still happen. So our last C is our second to last C is culmination. So in event culmination, we reach the climax. So this is the big day itself. This is your actual event. Your event has come to fruition and it's time to get the show on the road. But your job as event manager does not stop when the event starts. In fact, it's only just begun. So this is where you get to manage your timeline. Your production schedule comes in handy. You're managing all your people throughout the entire time, knowing what's happening when, keeping people in line, making sure that your vendors, your food, everything happens the way that you've planned. And the culmination phase, it really involves communicating, like I said, with your suppliers and your vendors and your team, keeping a close eye on timelines, monitoring security, ensuring that everything is set up at the right time. And just like in control phase, culmination is about steering the ship in the right direction and putting it into action. And being ready with those contingency plans or backup plans if something does happen to go off course. Make no mistake, like I said, something unexpected will happen throughout the course of your event, and that's okay. Let's try to stay calm. What will affect the actual outcome the most is how well you planned for it, how well you perform under pressure, and how timely the issue is communicated when it does occur. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to put you into breakout rooms pretty shortly. I'm just going to ask Dara if you're ready to go with those, Dara. And we're going to give each of you a day of challenge that I want you to work together to solve. So read through these guys. I'm not going to assign them to you. Instead, what I want you to do is actually just pick one. So what I recommend is maybe using your phone to take a quick little shot of this, or just write down the challenge that you would like to do in your group. And when you guys come together, you can decide which one you're actually going to solve together. So you'll have, I think we've got time. Yeah, I think we've got time for about 5 minutes. I know it'll be fast, but it's a small problem and I want you to try to work together quickly, okay? And then when we come back together, I'll ask you guys to share one of your ideas of how you would handle it. So challenge number one, as you can see here, is that your caterer is running late the morning of your event, leaving you with an hour before guests arrive, expecting breakfast as you promised. Challenge number two, everything's going great. Your event is on schedule, people are enjoying themselves, and the power goes out. Challenge number three, you skipped doing a site visit. You've now arrived on site and you see that your vision and that the venue are not exactly aligned and it is not decorated according to your plan or what you wanted. Challenge number four, your timeline has completely gone off the rails somewhere along the way. And now you're running way, way behind and you're not going to end on time, which is something that people get very frustrated with, let me tell you. Okay, so pick which one you would like to do. And Dara, if we could open our breakout rooms. Cool. Thank you, Dara.
All right.
And then we'll see you guys back here in a few minutes.
Sorry, just 2 seconds.
No worries. It takes a minute for them to open.
There's some duplicates because I think people joined with feed loop and then joined through Zoom.
Yes, yeah, I know. Those fun tech issues.
Okay. We will see you guys later.
Thank you, Dara. Thanks for getting those set up, Dara. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. It didn't let me set a timer. I was just gonna message you.
That's okay.
So
No,
I'm
that's all right.
kind of watching the time.
Yeah, it's all good. I can see it here too.
Okay.
Well, it's funny. I thought I would end early, but I think we're going to go right to, right to the limit.
Okay.
Do you know what time we actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, apparently room 5 asked for help.
Oh,
I don't know.
I can go in.
Yeah. What were you gonna say? About time?
I just can't remember what time. Probably 2 more minutes, I guess.
Yeah, probably 2 more minutes.
Okay.
you want me to bring them back now? You're muted, but.
Yeah, sorry, please.
All right.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry, I heard that some of you had some tech issues in your breakout rooms. I apologize for that. Hopefully that wasn't the case for everybody.
Danielle, you also had a couple of questions on the chat session that I don't know if you want to respond to now or after. It's up to you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd like to run through just asking you guys for your responses to your challenge. So I will do those first, and then we'll come back to our chat if that's okay. So does anybody want to share what your plan was in your room, which challenge you picked first, and then what your solution was? We got a shy group today. That's okay.
I can go first.
Thank you.
We picked challenge number 4 because that's something that happens pretty often, and it's something that I think a few of us have experienced in previous. So we said first would be to have clear communication with your guests to make sure that everyone is aware of what's going on and give people an out. So if they have something to do after that, they can leave, or if people are okay with staying, then you can still kind of keep the agenda going according to plan. But if you have to speed things up a little bit, then try to look at the agenda and see if there's some things that you can save time on and cut out to try to get back to schedule as quickly as possible.
That is perfect. I love what you guys came up with there, and you nailed it. You have to make sure that you communicate with your audience. And yeah, I love that, being able to cut something if you can, because that's great if you can always pull things back to being on schedule. Nicely done. Ryan, I see that your hand's up.
I would have volunteered first, but I got back after after the other group. So we also picked group 4 because, as Danielle says, there are some people can be control freaks, and are happy to admit that. And I was happy to admit that that's what I like to be, because sometimes it's incredibly important to just take charge and make sure that everything gets done in as quick of a period of time as possible. The key is to find the most important things that you need. Like if it's a conference and there's no guest speakers, you find new guest speakers. If a venue hasn't been finalized, or if there are additional people that are needed to make sure that something needs to be set up, you bring in as many additional people as possible to, including challenge 3 would be decorating. You bring in, you find as many people that are willing to come and decorate that to help with an event or something like that. But just make sure that the timelines that are used in the contingency plan that you would have set up from the very beginning get executed as early as possible. And that's most important, whether it's guests or food or venue or anything related to it, and find the most important things. Like if you have a conference that needs guest speakers, or that has guest speakers and they cancel, make sure you've got the guest speakers. And if you don't have a venue, make sure you get a venue. Whatever it takes. If it's an outdoor event, always plan for an indoor event if it needs to be brought indoors, and have it simultaneously happening. And that's the key, is finding the most important things. Even if some things you can't do, you always bring in all of the things you can do within the period of time you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Prioritizing is really important. That's a really great point, Ryan. Thank you.
Anytime.
Juliana, I see your hand up.
So we went with challenge number 3. I think in our room, I think everyone kind of experiences the situation at some point, either it's a personal thing or in a professional circumstance. And I have had it when I was helping with golf tournaments years ago. I haven't done it for a few years. We had a few times we ran out of things. or we didn't have enough things to decorate in our room. So like one thing like we had ended up doing, if somebody had to drive somewhere nearby and I knew the area, I went to get it. And then in past plans, I've done event planning a bit prior, is in my own planning process, I would have something that looks like, hey, if we ran out of something, where could we go that would have it nearby within maybe 10 or 15 minutes if we were near a venue. So like usually the dollar store, like sometimes the dollar store is definitely your best friend if you run out of something. It depends on what the event is, or if you know something, like is it the grocery store nearby, you need to go get something, or if you get it on the way the morning of. That has happened, just knowing where you have to kind of knowing your area too, like knowing within like maybe 10 or 20 kilometers from where you are, like what's on the way that you can drive to, what can you try me arranging by delivery on the day of or something.
For
like
sure.
that.
Yeah, definitely.
Leaving the venue and leaving things in a really sticky situation.
That's a good point. Yeah, because that even goes back to your venue selection, right? Making sure that you know the area in case something like that does go sideways and you need to be able to run out. That's a great point. Thank you. All right, I'd love to take more, but I know I'm probably going to run right up to the time here, and I want to make sure you guys get a break before your discussion room. So I'm going to keep on moving forward, but great job, guys. Thank you. And part of the poll practice was honestly just being able to throw a challenge at you and make you go away and say, solve it now, because that's kind of what it's like on the day of. So moving forward, our final C is closeout. And the closeout phase is what comes after the event is over. So this can include ensuring that the venue is clean and tidy, liaising with staff, closing off any caterers or entertainers, and especially anybody that you have to pay, making sure that you do that in a timely manner. It also extends to post-event management, such as evaluating your performance, thanking attendees and staff, reviewing your budget. Although you may just want to have a long lie down after your event, post-event management will help you to understand if and how you reached your goals for the event and how you can use the momentum gained from it to move forwards. Lastly, there's something that I always call a postmortem, which sometimes makes people laugh, but I like to perform a postmortem event evaluation. And it's a little bit morbid, I know, but this is where you get to go over the whole event, make lots of notes. What went well? What could have been improved? Were there unforeseen circumstances that could have been planned for? And it's a good idea to have this done really soon after your event ends, even if you don't want to. It's important to do it while it's still fresh in your minds. It's also a good idea to involve your whole team and even feedback from any outside vendors that you used as well. All right, guys, I apparently did some poor planning on my timing here. I went a little longer than I expected, but we're looking at budget is the last thing. I'm going to send it to you guys. I'm not going to bother going over to the screen now because we've all seen a budget, but basically my industry tips for this is to try to come up with a couple of different scenarios. So what I always like to do is to have a conservative projection and a best case projection, and then an average. So it's always nice to know if your event just doesn't pick up well and you just don't sell as many tickets or raise as much, what's that going to look like? What if it goes off with a huge bang and you get tons of stuff? What does that look like? And then using somewhere that's kind of in the middle as your actual budget number that you try to follow. And then the other thing that I highly recommend when you are budgeting, make sure that you include any expense that you can foresee coming up. And most importantly, it's important to include a line for contingency budget. And I always make that contingency budget 10% of what the total expenses are for your whole event. So when you'll see in this document, in the toolbox that I'll send to you guys, it's the very last line item, and it actually gets calculated from what the total of the expenses are. So this just helps you with any unforeseen things. Maybe you have to run out and purchase some more decorations, things like that. That's all going to go into that. And yeah, other than that, the template is pretty straightforward and easy to use. I'll send it to you guys, and you are more than welcome to reach out and ask me questions if you have any as well. So that is the end of essentials for planning a successful event. Hopefully it wasn't too terribly overwhelming. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see all your lovely faces again, because I appreciate you guys all being here so much. And like I said, I know I went right to the end here, and there was a couple questions that came up. And so what I would be happy to do is to address some of these questions in the email that I'll send out to you guys with the toolbox later, if that works for you. Yeah,
Thanks so much, Danielle. I think that's a great idea and a great contingency plan with our time going a little bit over. Just wanted to thank you for a great session. I'm just having visions of you in your fancy clothes with a shop vac. So that was a really good story that you told us. And Danielle has great attention to detail. I mean, she's in a couple of events for us in Alberta, and she's just fantastic. So if you have other questions, I'm sure that she'd be happy to answer them. You can reach out to her at dredicop@crohnsandcolitis.ca. Her email is around, so do reach out to her. And thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to attend today's session. I hope that you were able to benefit from it and learn some amazing tips for how to plan an event. I know that somebody was planning a wedding, so that's really exciting. So great job, Danielle. And we will see you all back in 10 minutes at the discussion group, which starts at 3:25 Eastern time. So enjoy your break and we'll see you there. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.